Hey everybody, what's going on? I'm Fabian for Liberty. So last night I was talking to a friend of mine who is a high-level, just say he's a high-level guy at a bank. We'll leave it at that. A big mega bank. And it's interesting because he gets the fraud of what the big banks are doing, how this particular bank he works with or works at is one of the banks that sits on the board of the Federal Reserve. But he was telling me, and he's high-level at Wall Street, telling me that a couple of people at a break were talking regarding the HSBC thing of basically not giving people their money. And jokingly, one of like the upper managers above him, and these are all high-level people, like again, at a big Wall Street mega bank. And he was saying how they were kind of, one of the high-level people started joking about how, well, that's probably going to happen in America as well. Now, you know, people really are, I'd say some really smart people, well-to-do, are so removed from the reality of a bank holiday or banks being shut down or bank runs taking place where you can't get your money out of the bank. Now, in just the last week, now remember, just a couple years ago, we saw this throughout Europe, and already capital controls have spread throughout Europe, where many cases, cash transactions above $1,000 or 1,000 euros are illegal. You know, the Italians have currency-sniffing dogs on the border of Switzerland. They have all kinds of capital controls that they've implemented. Now, capital controls in America really started a couple years ago with the implementation of FATCA, where it made it much more difficult for someone living in America to, let's say, have a Swiss bank account, because they went to those banks in Switzerland, they went to those other banks, not all countries have complied with this, or not all of them have turned away U.S. customers, but the bottom line was they went to these banks, the U.S. government did, and they said, listen, we want all your records of U.S. customers, plus here's a whole laundry list of regulations that you need to abide by if you take on an American customer. So you had banks in Switzerland, in fact one of the oldest banks in Switzerland, not the oldest, but among one of the oldest, that catered to international clients, had to shut down because they pretty much lost all their clients. And that's a form of capital controls where you have the state, particularly the U.S. government, by force threatening other banks to say, hey, you comply or we're going to basically, you know. I had a real good friend of mine, the Magabu Guru. You should just look him up, Richard Dotty. He's incredible. I had the opportunity to just share a lot of time with him. He's an incredible person. Anyways, I always asked him, I said, well, what do you think about foreign bank accounts? Isn't it a good idea? Because the idea is if you are in a country where that capital controls take place or they're about to take place or some monumental event's about to happen, you kind of know it, you can have your money transferred from your bank in the country you live in to that offshore bank, maybe wired. A lot of banks now allow you to send wires by your computer, from home, remotely, whatever. And he said, well, perhaps, but, let's say that in the Grand Cayman Islands, there's all these people with money in their banks or, all kinds of stuff in the safe deposit boxes. What's stopping America from sending 4,000 Marines to storm the Grand Cayman Islands and say, listen, we basically want to seize all these bank accounts? Now, that was funny because he would laugh back then, and he's like, well, you think that can't happen? But absolutely it would happen because he was somebody who believed in hyperinflation. I believe in hyperinflation, or should I more say I believe in, of course, hyperinflation is a reality. It's happened many times to many countries. But I believe ultimately fiat currency fails because of the reckless, insane principles. It seems like humanity always tries to kind of best themselves, right? It's like the Weimar hyperinflation wasn't good enough, so now America almost has to one-up the world in one of the most spectacular shows of hyperinflation the world's ever seen. Now, we're not there yet, but anyways, the point is that banks across the country, in Russia, we've had several banks now say, look, we're going to have a week-long bank holiday, basically. In China, we've had a close to $500 billion bank run take place, or trillions of dollars totally in shadow banking, but hundreds of millions in a bank run where the Chinese banks have basically already said, look, we're going to stop letting you get your cash out. And that's really not so surprising to me, right? It's China. It's a state-run economy. But what is surprising to me is seeing a bank like an HSBC in London, where they're now basically requiring customers to have a permission slip to get your money out. Totally illegal and totally insane, but if I wasn't, where I'm at with respect to just my real estate company and knowing this, I could tell you probably last year, at least over 6 times, I had investors, high net worth individuals that had gone to a bank. They needed to take some money out for a real estate transaction. And let's say the number was $125,000 that they were going to take out from the bank. You would have the bank literally treat them like a criminal, and it would take hours for them to just get their money out. So this has been going on already for some time. Now in London, in HSBC, excuse the phone ringing in the back, it'll stop in a second. In HSBC, you have people needing the permission slip. You need to go with a note saying, here's where the money's going to go. But again, you have to understand that the global financial system, I'm writing right now the Global Economic Reset book that I'm working on, and we'll be doing a ton of research. But one of the things we were talking about yesterday was in the Cold War, the concept of mutually assured destruction, right? We knew that if America launched some Titan missiles on St. Petersburg or in Stalingrad or whatever, that the Soviets would launch a ton of missiles in retaliation. Ultimately, everybody would be dead in a thermonuclear war. Well, that's happened economically as well today by the interconnectedness of derivatives, of the banking system, where bank runs today in Europe, or let's just say heavy dollar selling in China, and then later on in Europe, by the time Americans wake up, it could literally be on fire where they would have to have emergency, bank holidays, closing down banks. Now, remember, we have Joe Biden on record talking about how John Corzine was so brilliant that when the 2008 crash was taking place, and you have another senator talking about how by the end of the business day, trillions of dollars were being taken out of the banking system, that you had Joe Biden saying, yeah, we talked and considered about a bank holiday. So that's not too out of the ordinary. My point for this video is just, what do you do about it, right? Do you look at alternatives as far as having foreign bank accounts? Do you maybe have bank accounts in smaller credit unions that might not be as risk as, let's say, a Bank of America? But see, ultimately, you have to understand that when, we've grown up in a paradigm where it's like, yeah, you put your money in the bank. That's where you have your savings account. But people really need to start thinking about alternatives to that. Because again, in global resets, that idea is something that all of a sudden you can't get access to your money, or by the time you do get access to your money, it's been devalued by half, as we're seeing in Venezuela and in Argentina, where currency devaluations are massive. One last point I want to just make real quick is the IMF just a couple days ago was in essence warning the Americans or the Federal Reserve, hey, your money, the fact that you've stopped the money printing is causing serious problems and has global ramifications. And having the U.S. stop its QE, stop its, its tapering, although I don't believe it's tapering, but just on the surface, it causes financial panic. Because ultimately the markets are realizing that you can't just print money forever in hopes that the economy is going to keep going up, or that prices will continue to be inflated, and that stimulus, it's a bunch of phony wealth. It comes to an end almost always. And anyways, like to hear what you have to say about potential bank runs, what you've seen out there. I'm Fabian for Liberty. Thanks for watching. I'm out.